Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I will be moderating this next session 3, Youth and Climate Justice and Intergenerational Dialogue. And I think I'm at the top end of the generation, and Collins, you're at the lower end, but let me just introduce you in a minute. So the event is also going to be broadcasted on YouTube for a wider audience beyond the membership of the ACT Alliance. And this dialogue will focus on challenges and opportunities for youth to get involved and act on climate change. The dialogue is intended to facilitate overall strategies and actions for youth engagement on climate action within the ACT Alliance and beyond, and to emphasize the role of faith in fighting for climate action and justice. We have a range of speakers, but I'll leave the introduction of them to the master of ceremony and moderator of this event, who will also make the introduction of the speakers. And I'm just getting off script here a bit because I met many of you at the COP in Glasgow, and I think we have so much to learn and so much to be proud of. So let me introduce Mr. Colin Shava, a young Zimbabwean who is the Executive Secretary for Youth at the All Africa Conference of Churches. And you're also a well-known ACT Alliance youth activist. And you were also in Uppsala, where I met you. So Collins, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, moderator, Ms. Bigete, for the introduction, and thank you to the team for allowing us to have this session together, and I'm proud and happy to be part of it. As has been said, ladies and gentlemen, this is an event, a youth and climate justice and intergenerational dialogue, and we have a mixture of generations here as part of our 4 panelists, which I will introduce as we move forward and we start our conversation. And we hope to have this exciting conversation, as we all know that climate change is affecting us, is upon us, and is a threat to lives and livelihoods and creation all around the world. And we all see that, and how it is exacerbating poverty, how it is even unrooting some of the root causes of our inequalities that are already existing in our communities. And as a start, I'll just probably just give a background of why the church, why the people of faith are part of the climate justice movement, are part of the climate change discussions. One of the key things that we need to realize is from the Bible, Genesis 2, verse 15, when the Lord says, the Lord God took man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. Thus, God gave us the power, God gave us the mandate to work on his land and to protect his creation. And as a young Christian, as a young activist, I see that climate change is not discussed thoroughly in the Bible, but believers are given facts to the world. And it's not because the Bible, when it was written, climate change was not there during that time. But however, it is our right for us to take care of the planet, as given the mandate that I have just read from Genesis, and how we can help the earth as God's stewards, as God's good stewards. We are called to be stewards of creation, and not only as Christians, but as people of faith. We all have our diverse views on prayers, on worship, on God, but in terms of the environment, our faith calls us to be stewards of creation, to be stewards of good creation, to be good stewards of God. And I've seen that in my years of engaging in this topic, religion and faith has proved to have more influence than politics because of this ability for us, the followers, to self-introspect, to think deeply in our individual behavior. Most of the time, we are alone and turn to self-introspect in the light of our religion, in the light of our faith. That's where the power of the soft power of religion, the soft power of our beliefs come in, that we need to influence human behavior. We need to influence human thinking on climate change and on climate justice. And as such, we can see that the natural environment itself is a major domain, a source of livelihoods for all human beings and non-human living things. And as such, as we are given the mandate by God to take care of it, it is not only for us to leave it there, but for us to take charge and help with the biblical mandate for the church for environmental care, which is for us to commit to the task of promoting a sound and a healthy environment of people, the poor, the marginalized, the wildlife, the plants, and linking environmental concerns as well as with social justice issues. It's not only about climate change, but about the people, about the vulnerable, about the children, about the young people of this world who will suffer the consequences of climate change, of which they were not part of what is happening now. And it's very important that the church's calling to service must be directed to the life-affirming substance of God's creation. And the church as an institution can use its influence at national and regional level to do some lobby work, to politicians, the community leaders, to adopt coherent and comprehensive strategies. As the church as well, as an institution, it can help the people by providing hope to the people, by helping those who are in need, those who are affected by climate change, and those who need the assistance. And church can use its soft power and its influence to shape human behavior. And as such, as people of faith, young and old, we all have a part to play in these discussions. Henceforth, we have this discussion today at this very important gathering, the 8th General Assembly, where people from diverse backgrounds come together to discuss these issues. And I have today a very interesting panel that I'll introduce to you that are going to be with us. We have 4 panelists. We have Dr. Cornelia Füllkrug-Weitzel from Germany. We have Mr. Mattias Søderberg from Denmark. We have Ms. Patricia Mukango from Philippines, and we have Mr. Romario Dohmann from Argentina. And these people who are going to speak to different aspects that we are going to be shaping this discussion. And I would like now to call upon our first speaker of the day as we delve deeper to get into the panel. And I'm going to ask Mr. Mattias Søderberg to unmute himself. Mr. Mattias Søderberg is the chief advisor at Dan Church Aid and a co-chair of the ACT Alliance Climate Justice Group. And Mattias has been part of the ACT Alliance cooperation-related climate change since 2008. And he was the first manager of the ACT Advocacy Academy that we all know of, and some of us have been part of it. And he's going to be the first speaker today. And I'm going to ask him a question. Mr. Mattias, are you able to speak now? Yes, please, as the members of the team help us to unmute Mr. Mattias. Mr. Mattias, your question today is, what are the major challenges you see in achieving climate justice? And I give you 3 minutes for that.
Thank you. And firstly, thanks a lot for inviting me to attend this important event as well. When we talk about climate change, it's crucial to also talk about youth, and because it's the future we're talking about as well as the present. But when it comes to the future, it's youth of today will be very affected by what's happening today in relation to climate change. So thanks. And regarding your question, I think when we talk about climate justice, you're all well aware that climate justice is the slogan for ACT Alliance, and we've been calling for climate justice for many years. But it's also a controversial and difficult slogan. Now, when we talk about climate change, we must be aware that it's a global challenge, and climate justice can only be achieved if we cooperate and work together. So climate justice is closely linked to the global cooperation. We know polluters have the main responsibility for the global warming, as their emissions contribute to climate change. Therefore, to achieve climate justice, the polluters have to pay. But it's not enough to only pay, even though the money, of course, are needed. Climate change is linked to lifestyles and development paths for the countries. It's linked to how we live, how we produce, what we eat, how we travel. All of these things are influenced or are influencing the global warming and climate change. And climate justice can therefore only be achieved if polluters both pay, but if they also take action. And this is the challenge. It's not enough to just put the money on the table. There's also a need to transform the way we live. So polluters will have to pay, both by changing their own way of life and to ensure that it becomes sustainable, and by mobilizing the support to the global south, mobilizing the money to ensure that there is available support for vulnerable and poor communities which are facing the effects of climate change today. These are people who need support both to mitigate climate change, to adapt to the effects of climate change, and to address loss and damage caused by climate-related disasters. Vulnerable communities facing climate change will also have to take action. However, they should never stand alone, and polluters and countries with both historic and existing emissions must stand by their side. This is the only moral path towards climate justice, and it's the only path we as global alliances is promoting or calling for. We need climate justice, and we need it now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mattias, for the wonderful submission and the way you talk about how young people are the most affected about that. And as we want to interact as well with the same question, I'd probably like to ask if Patricia is on and if she can respond to the first question on the major challenges you see on achieving climate justice. And if you have a comment on what Mattias has already said as a young person.
Okay, yes. I think I totally agree when Mattias said that climate change is not only affecting our future, but also our present. And I would also like to build on that, especially in the experiences and what the world witnessed from the COP26. I think there are three major challenges that we're facing. First is when there's downplaying of the common but differentiated responsibilities in addressing the climate crisis. This happens whenever historical injustices of resource curse or resource traps and unjust economic agreements were left out of the discussion. Second, and I think this is very recent, when the world leaders and business leaders water down commitments on carbon cuts and climate finance. And lastly, this is very close to my heart, and I know that in other countries, this is also being experienced. There's also a chilling trend of silencing grassroots voices of our environmental defenders and activists, especially in authoritarian regimes and countries where impunity persists. So I think these are huge stumbling blocks in achieving climate justice. And we from the youth are also experiencing this now.
Thank you. Thank you, Patricia, for that. I think you've mentioned some of the key things, and one of the key things of the closing space and how even environmental activists are being murdered in some of the parts of the world, and which is quite an interesting one. But as we move forward, we'll continue to interact on these questions. And I would love to come to question 2. Patricia, as you're already on the screen, and this question is directed to you. What particular impact do these issues have on young people? And how do you already see young people engaging in climate justice work?
Yes, so first on the impacts of climate change cut across almost every aspect in the lives of the youth. Besides, it's of course the direct environmental impacts to our communities, our social and economic situations are heavily affected as well, especially for the youth in developing and underdeveloped countries. we have to note that this composes the majority of the global youth population. For instance, in the Philippines, the majority of the youth are coming from the basic sectors, workers and farmers. They are put in the vulnerable situation when climate change impacts the livelihoods in their communities, food and water sources, and way of life. Our right to food, our right to education is hindered when because of school suspensions. Our right to have a secured shelter is hampered when we live in evacuation centers and tent cities with miserable conditions. And of course, children's right to play is also affected. And then there's also the gender component in the climate impacts. Young women and girls are more vulnerable to gender-based violence. We have especially seen this in the super typhoon Haiyan devastation in 2013, wherein young women were forced to sell their bodies for food and cash. So for most of the global youth, the climate crisis is already in our communities and in our homes today, and not just 5, 10, or 20 years from now. It does not only rob us of our future, but also of our present. So this pushes us to take urgent action, as seen on the COP26 and in thousands of climate strikes happening around the world. The youth are bringing the stories from the grassroots to the conference halls, to the streets, and we are organizing ourselves in the communities, launching campaigns with churches and organizations. I've seen organized pilgrimages for climate justice, community integrations, volunteer work, and through creative arts. And of course, along the way, we are exposing the big polluters themselves. So we're taking this as our urgent task because we may be the last generation to take up climate mitigation. And as we run out of time, we fear that the next decades, the next generations may be all about adaptation and survival. So as we act for climate justice, we are very much aware that the youth are not the only and should not be the only one in the front lines. We have with us the most vulnerable, at risk, marginalized communities. And this is why in the Philippines, our battle cry against climate change is, the seas are rising, but so are we.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was Patricia Mukango from the Philippines. She's a 26-year-old human rights worker working on era and climate change adaptation. And she also serves as the co-chair of the Earth Youth Corp. And you can see the passion in her and the points that she's making. And I want to bring Mattias back to the screen again, just to give him also an opportunity to respond to the submissions of Patricia, in which she talked about the particular impact which the climate justice issues have on young people, and how do you see youth engaging in climate justice work, Mattias? In a minute, yeah.
Thank you, and I think it's Patricia put it very, very well, and also the importance of focusing on adaptation and helping those who are affected by climate change. It's so easy that we only talk about the wind power and solar power and other solutions to create renewable energy and electric cars, but climate change is much, much more, and we need always to stand by the side with those who are in need of support. So really, really good point. And I would just also like to just shortly to link to the need for action. As we as ACT members, we can make a difference in many ways, but we should not forget that many of the things, which the changes we want to see, they will happen on national level, or they must happen on national level. We need governments and polluters on national level to take action, and therefore there's a need for ACT members to make a push and to engage in national advocacy as well. It's not enough to look at the global UN processes. It's time also to make sure things are happening on the ground.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I don't know if Dr. Cornelia is here. Maybe if she wants to respond to the question on youth. If Dr. Cornelia is here, is on, if you'd also want to respond to the particular impact which climate change has on young people, and how do you see youth engaging in climate justice work from your experience?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, I mean, it was very well and comprehensively said by Patricia what would be or what are the impacts of climate change on youth. I would only like to include or to add that those who are not active or don't find the way so far and still have to be reached by those young people who are active, they tend to the opposite, to real despair. And I think we have, as churches, especially as churches and as church youth, we do need to address that and to spread hope by engaging them and engaging together in actions against climate change and climate injustice. Secondly, I just want to say I see a great impact by youth coming up through throughout the last, let us say, 3 or 4 or 5 years, as organized by Fridays for Future or any others. Given the example of Germany, where youth activists went to the Constitutional Court to say that what the plans of our government to reduce gashouse emissions are very, very obvious, not ambitious enough, and are very, very obvious, not enough to save and secure our future. So there is an urgent need. It's not a matter of 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. You have to act now. And indeed, our Constitutional Court has given the task to our government to revise its plans and to come up with a more ambitious national plan. I think that's a huge, huge success for young people, huge success. And no one would have expected that they would go to court. Even they say, yeah, go on the streets, do demonstrations, blah, blah, rally, da, 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 da. But this is the most difficult way to act politically. And I think that was very successful.
Thank you, Dr. Cornelia. I'm sure you will come in again for the other questions. So I'm going to now move on to the third question of the day. And I'm going to introduce our speaker for that. And it's Mr. Romario Dohmann from Argentina. He's a youth climate activist from the LWF, and he's a youth coordinator of the Evangelical Church of Rio de la Plata in Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay. And he's one of the coordinators of the pastoral ministry for the promotion of care for creation in this church, and is responsible for the initiative that aims to mitigate climate change effects with the reforestation of native forests, which is coordinating there. And in 2018, he was at the COP24, and in 2021, he was at the COP26 virtually. And I understand he's going to speak in Spanish, so you need to find the interpretation button and switch on to English. And his question is, Mr. Romario, your question is, how do you see faith contributing to achieve climate justice? In 3 minutes. Romario.
Ok, hola a todos, saludos desde Argentina y desde los jóvenes de la Federación Luterana Mundial. En primer lugar, es muy importante hablar de justicia climática y en este lugar que donde estamos hoy, así que celebro que estemos hablando de justicia climática en las iglesias, en las comunidades de fe. Ayer, en el culto del primer domingo de Adviento, durante la reflexión, el pastor habló del libro de Apocalipsis y mencionó al cambio climático, entre otros temas. Celebro este espacio que además es intergeneracional, porque el cambio climático es una lucha de todos, de todas, de niños, de jóvenes y de adultos. Sabemos que las consecuencias del cambio climático nos afectan a todos y todas, pero no de forma equitativa. Por eso es importante vincularlo con políticas sociales de protección a los más débiles. No hay justicia climática sin justicia social. Considero fundamental el vincular el compromiso de nuestra fe como mayordomos de la creación de Dios, no dueños ni creadores. Estamos llamados a cuidarla, a protegerla. Nuestra responsabilidad cristiana nos llama a alejarnos de ese lugar de todopoderosos y aceptar nuestro rol como parte de una creación divina, perfecta. Es desde este lugar donde las iglesias y personas vamos movilizando, sensibilizando y poniendo en práctica, en acciones, en iniciativas, en programas, en proyectos, para así poder lograr la justicia climática. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Romario, for that, and also for giving us some of your time to interact. I want to bring back Patricia to the screen and ask her the same question. How do you see faith contribution to achieving climate justice as a young person of faith? What do you think? How do you see faith contributing to achieving climate justice?
Yeah, of course, I was able to nurture my faith inside my church, and I think it played a big role in the churches played a big role in my faith in developing that into providing and strengthening in me, and I think in all of us, a strong sense of moral conscience, ethics, and goodwill. And these values and principles is what unites us to recognize, protect, and uphold the integrity of creation and human dignity. And this later on translates to what, like Romario said, to more organized actions for instance, in our humanitarian development and advocacy work, like here in ACT Alliance. So it all comes down to how our faith translates to values, and how our values translate to organized and united actions.
Wow, powerful from Patricia. I don't know if Dr. Cornelia, if you have any response to Romario's submissions and Patricia's submissions as well on faith contributing to climate justice.
Yeah, I already mentioned hope as, for me, the strongest gift of our faith. And I do believe that it is time to strengthen the hope of the communities and the hope of young people, especially, who don't have the experience yet and the resilience yet, that even in especially very dark times, our God always opens doors, and he puts away the huge stone from the grave in order to open new futures and to lead us into new dimensions of life. And which has been for me, I think I can compete with Birgit. I'm the really oldest here. For me, like 45 years of struggles, of political social struggles as part of social movements. I met always all kind of barriers, hindrances, and what have you, and it so many times it looked like future is soon over. We had the challenge of the nuclear weapons and nuclear race, for example, but with this support of our God and with our faith, we can continue to struggle, even if everything else looks like it's impossible, you cannot do anything, and even if experience tells you, oh, it has never worked. No, still we have to be courageous, and we can be courageous following our God.
Awful. Mattias, maybe in 1 minute, or if you want to respond to that third question, your contribution, Mattias.
I'm muted. I would like to speak. Thanks. Thanks. Yeah, I would actually just respond in the same way as Cornelia, because I think the added value we have as faith movement, one of the added values, we have many, but one compared to many other actors is that we can refer to or give hope and to give strength to enable action, because there are so many who lose faith and lose the energy they need to act, and if we're going to act on climate change, we need we need also to hope and believe that it's possible to create a sustainable future. And this is also linking back to the youth. I'm so encouraged and so inspired by all the young people who are calling for action, because it's also showing that there is a hope. There are people on the streets, people who our future, the young people who really know that there's need to take action, and that gives also hope. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Mattias, for that and for the contribution. Now we'll move on to the last question. But before we go there, I've just been reminded that if you have a question, you can put it in the chat box or in the Q&A section so that we pick it up. And we're just left with one question. And after that, we will be taking in the questions and the answers from our panelists. But I'll move on to the last speaker. She's already interacted with some of us, and I just have to introduce her because I have not done that. It's Dr. Cornelia Füllkrug-Weitzel from Germany. She's the ACT Alliance Goodwill Ambassador for Climate Justice, and she served as the president of Bread for the World until February this year, and also served as the moderator of ACT Alliance Governing Board from 2010 to 2014, and chair of the ACT Membership and Nominations Committee from 2014 to 2018. Already we have heard her speak with part of the other panelists, but we have a specific question for her, which is the last question for the day, as what does ACT Alliance need to do to achieve climate justice? Dr. Cornelia.
To unmute me, yeah, okay, thank you.
Oh.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Collins. With regard to climate justice, I think ACT Alliance has to and does already intervene in 4 areas. One is to stop greenhouse gas emissions, so to become climate neutral as soon as possible for all of the countries, but mainly the emitting countries. Second, to ensure that vulnerable countries and vulnerable people receive sufficient and adequate support from the polluters countries to adapt to the changing living conditions. Third is to assure that losses and damages are compensated by those responsible for them. And fourth is to bring to the floor and keep vital the question about the rights of climate refugees. When it comes to the first one, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, I would say that ACT members should and could, of course, they need to raise awareness together with the churches and the congregations, first of all, to put our own house in order. So which means to come up and implement goals and plans to become climate neutral as churches and church institutions as soon as possible. Secondly, to join any kind of campaigns, or like the Friday for Futures mass movements, any kind of public campaigns, and use any other means to raise public awareness and to create pressure from below, so to speak, and raise the ethical voice. And to join efforts to bring cases of too unambitious plans to court, as I have been referring to already. I need not to repeat that. And to, throughout the year, form alliances with other civil societies actors, including trade unions, for example, to lobby and pressurize governments. With regards to the second, the adaptation issue, ACT members together with the churches in the global south would need to pressurize their governments and hold them accountable to properly analyze bottom up the needs for adaptation, to come up with concrete and realistic adaptation plans and budgets to be presented to the donors, and then of course to be implemented domestically. With regard to members of major polluting countries, I think ACT members, including those in the south, by the way, ACT members should hold their governments accountable to balance their climate funding, their climate funds between mitigation and adaptation, and to raise their commitments and to stick to them, to deliver up to the level of commitments to finance adaptation. And they should as well support multi-stakeholder initiatives to focus their attention, their investment, their transfer of knowledge, not only on mitigation, but on adaptation as well. When it comes to loss and damage, the ACT Alliance has this unique selling point, as we used to say, that we are rooted in local congregations and communities and are present and work with people in remote areas where governments are hardly interested nor present. At least they don't spend their attention to those places and would not recognize their changing living conditions and realities in times of climate change in their analysis and their plans. So when it comes to understanding the devastating effects of climate change and climate change induced losses and damages, there we have a unique selling point. In order to achieve a compensation for loss and damage, we have the chance to first help the congregations, help the communities to analyze how the climate change is affecting their environment, their livelihoods, and their lives, and to document that, and to collect and report data about that, and to raise the voices based on those data, give those data either first to the governments as well as to those who are internationally busy and responsible for handling loss and damages issues. Secondly, as we all are, or as many ACT members are working on the ground in the area of adaptation and in the area of loss and damages, I think we should take that into consideration in our own programs and adapt our own programs and our own concrete actions to those issues. I think that's mainly, I think my time is gone already. That's mainly what it is. Just to end with the very last point, we need to encourage or organize, facilitate much more exchange between the members in the different parts of the world to support each other with either knowledge or insights, perspectives, so that we together can raise very, very, very strongly the realities of loss and damage. Thank you.
Doctor, thank you, Doctor. I'll need to cut you off there. I know you have loved to go on and on, but we will need to respect the time. But I'll probably give 1 minute to Romario. What do you think the Alliance must do to achieve climate justice? Romario, just 1 minute.
Okay. Esta no es una lucha de equipos, ni de partidos, ni de fronteras, es una lucha de todos y de todas. Cuando se trata de desastres naturales, no hay pasaportes, ni aduanas, ni edades, ni clases sociales, aunque está claro que lo que más sufren siempre son los más vulnerables. Creo que en todos los ámbitos de la vida es necesario las alianzas, de trabajar en red, unidos, que generan el intercambio de ideas, de visiones, y en este caso, más que nunca. Hay muchas decisiones drásticas y urgentes que deben tomarse y necesitamos la fuerza y el compromiso de todos, así como también de la creatividad, del ingenio, de todas las organizaciones que conforman ACT Alliance y otras organizaciones también en búsqueda de esta situación muy compleja. Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you for sticking to time, Romario, for that. And I'll probably just pose a question. I see that there are some questions in the chat box that I'll pose, but there is a specific question from the Youth Corps. And I would like to ask them to two of the panelists. It is the issue of youth tokenism or participation without inclusion. This was raised within the Youth COP discussions, and it's especially important within the climate justice talks, since we have seen that young people have been taking the lead to raising critical voices and protesting all over the world. And youth are taking a more active role in climate issues and in many parts of the world. And they're also being somewhat included in climate conferences, in talks, and in meetings. But however, there was a key concern from the Youth COP that being included not the only goal for youth participation, since inclusion is not necessarily linked to the influence and actually being considered or consulted on issues relating to young people and their common future. Therefore, I would like to raise a question to the panel, starting with Mattias. I would like to raise a question to you. How can young people's work be meaningful, and how can we have active youth inclusion on climate-related issues, policy formulation, and decision-making, and not tokenism, Mattias?
Thank you. Then I can also directly make some commercial here about the climate work within the ACT Alliance, because in the Climate Justice Group, we are committed to work closely with the youth, and especially the Youth COP. We have, for example, mailing lists and groups where young people from all over from all parts of the ACT Alliance can join and be part and take part. And I'm also happy that we have a good cooperation with the Youth COP. And also just to remind that, as also was mentioned before, it's not just about pushing the governments, we also need to walk the talk. And this is also something the Climate Justice Group is happy to support within the ACT Alliance. So yes, we want to work together, and we do what we can to promote this cooperation.
Thank you, Mattias. Maybe Dr. Cornelia, in 1 minute, what would you say we should do? How can we work for meaningful and active youth inclusion in climate-related issues and policy formulations in 1 minute?
Yeah, I'm just saying, sorry, I don't hear Mattias speaking, not the last time, neither this time. So I'm sorry, I cannot comment on what he has been saying, but I do believe that indeed young people should be involved more, and that this would question our whole idea and methodologies of representation, because normally if you ask members to become represented, they would send their CEOs. That's the normal, and that I think should change. It is, for me, it's very encouraging, and I think it's a result of Fridays for Future in Germany that our parliament, which was just recently elected, became much younger now. Like one party has been sending 40% young people, 40% coming from the party youth, 40%, and I think that's the way.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Cornelia, for that. I don't know, Patricia, if you have something to say, since you're from the Youth COP, in 1 minute for you as well.
Okay, yeah, this has been quite a discussion in the Youth COP, because we are very eager to participate, but participate not in a sort of as a token or as a decoration in groups, because that really happens when we talk about youth participation. So we want to move forward from youth participation to youth decision making, youth leadership, and that will only happen when we are empowered through youth empowerment. And that's very important, because if we want to hear the voices from the grassroots, the young people could carry that. And if we want to mobilize the communities, the young people could carry that. If we want to launch campaigns, powerful campaigns that speaks to the broader masses across all levels, and then the youth could help you, with that. And I think it's all about cooperation and empowerment and capacity building, education. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that quick one. And it's very happy to hear the youth voice on these issues and how it keeps on coming. And I'm sure it will keep on coming in the days to come. But I just want to go out to the questions from the floor. And there is one question from Bernard. They say that if climate change affects different parts of the world differently, what should be done in order that our response would be comprehensive and not selective. Would I pose this to you, Romario?
Sí, el mayor desafío en este sentido es frenar la desigualdad social y económica, tanto global como dentro de cada país. Ya dije, no hay justicia climática sin justicia social. Y es ahí, es vivir, producir, pensando en el prójimo, pensando en el otro. Porque vivimos en un mundo muy individualista, individual como personas y como países, donde no nos preocupa si con nuestras acciones contaminamos o envenenamos o empobrecemos a otros. Ese es el desafío. Y además, el desafío es tomar medidas drásticas y urgentes reales, como dijo Cornelia, urgentes reales, que es lo que realmente necesitamos. Aún seguimos como gobiernos, como organizaciones, tomando medidas suaves, livianas. Conocemos cuál es el problema, sabemos qué es lo que está sucediendo, pero siento que no estamos preparados para este desafío de tomar esas medidas difíciles que es reclamar a los gobiernos, pero también ayudar a los gobiernos a reclamar a otros gobiernos, ¿sí? No solo el gobierno puede hacer todo solo, ahí estamos nosotros, como organizaciones, pero también como Act Alliance.
Thank you for that response, Romario. I think we have a number of them questions, so I'll just be picking one and placing it to the relevant people. And the next question is from Joseph. And what has been the role of ACT in loss and damage compensation, and to what extent compensations have been accessed or given to southern countries who are affected with the most and affected the most in view of climate change? And what, I think it ends there. But I'll give this to Mattias, who has been part of the negotiations to respond to this question on loss and damage compensation.
Thank you. I'm actually very proud and happy to be able to say that we have done a lot. I think ACT Alliance and ACT members have been pushing very hard for bringing loss and damage onto the agenda. And even if the COP in Glasgow, the summit, did not deliver exactly what we want, I'm sure the result is better than it could have been on loss and damage. And that's, to a certain extent, we should have some credit for that. We've been talking to so many different governments, and we have been pushing hard both in media, through stunts and campaign events, and through our lobby efforts. And I think that has also delivered some results. Of course, we're still far from where we want to be, but we will continue, and this is a priority for the coming year as well. It will be a big topic at the next COP. Thanks.
Thank you, Mattias, for the quick one. I don't know, Dr. Cornelia, you have 1 minute as well.
Yes, please. Thank you. It's not just to add to what Mattias has been saying. It's not just an issue at the next COP, but it is an issue for us throughout the whole year, because now they try to get nearer to the issue. I mean, they are maneuvering all the time, and the pushes have to get now, not only at the COP27. I think that's what Mattias felt as well, or wanted to say as well. But what I want to say is that the real hot issue is that the northern countries, who are the major polluters, who have been the major polluters and benefiters from climate change, from greenhouse gas emissions during the last decades or century, they don't want to take up any responsibility or accountability for that in the way of responsibility. I think they are ready to pay. That's how we solve the problems all the times. Become donors rather than becoming those who have to confess their sins and to pay for that. it is, I can foresee that there will be, that money will come, not the amount which is necessary, but money will come, but it will come not on top of development and humanitarian aid, but as fresh and new money, but it will come as part of it. So it will come as charity and will not recognize the right of those peoples who are affected by loss and damage by the climate change and have losses and damage, their right to get compensated. So it's a rights issue, but it will be handled like a charity issue. And that's the kind of discourse we had with regard to colonialism, racism, what have you. So I think that's the real difficulty in it. And we have to pressurize for that. Yeah, they don't want to call it compensation, fine, because it has its legal component, but nonetheless, we have to pressure that this is their, it's their duty, it's their accountability, it's their responsibility, and there's no way out. It is not development and it is not humanitarian aid, not only because the money will then we will then lack money for development and humanitarian aid because they relabel it and count it twice, but because it gives the wrong narrative.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. I feel like this conversation can go on and on. But Patricia, I feel like you're agitated and you want to say something. I'll give you a minute as well, since we still have some more time for question and answer.
Yeah, from what I'm seeing is that ACT Alliance is already doing an excellent job in its advocacies and its lobbying efforts and campaigns, especially in our climate conferences. But seeing that world leaders and business leaders would just stall the decisions, downplay decisions, or water down commitments, I think it's also time for us to go beyond these COPs and just take a more daring, firmer stance on climate change, and like outside these conference halls. And that's what the communities are doing. Actually, they're already out there and we are with them, but we need to make more daring, stronger stance on that. And it starts from those high risk, most affected countries, and through localization of humanitarian response, supporting our country forums, national members in their humanitarian efforts, climate change adaptation efforts, and in their climate advocacies. I think that's how we could move forward with those loss and damages. From the global level, let's take it to the national, and then from the community level, we gain strength from there and take it also to the national and the global level.
Thank you for that, Patricia. I think I see some comments in the chat box, and one of them is a really important discussion is from Amanda. Climate justice, social justice, and financial justice are connected and need to be addressed together. Religious institutions must play their role in financial justice conversation. ACT Alliance is in a good position to raise its voice on the issue of finance, like hoarding of COVID vaccines. In the rich countries, climate justice cannot be achieved if rich countries do not deliver their commitments equitably and justly. And this is a comment, and I think it just reiterates what the panelists have been saying. There is another question which I am seeing here, which talks about with little progress at COP 2026. What to do about the future. The civil society agenda is not being followed, and more processes of radicalization is what is not negotiable. And in the face of so many deaths and destruction of nature, how does this impact ACT in its advocacy policies and participation in autonomous global civil society processes beyond the conferences that aim at 2030, which already counts a long way in the face of the crisis that we are going through on the planet. I don't know if Mattias would like to also come in on this one or on the little progress on COP26 and the comment there.
Yeah, well, it's a bit, yeah, it's true. We're far from where we need to be, and it's the future. It's not so bright as we would like it to be. But I would like to get back to the question about hope. I think there's still hope, and I think maybe I'm naive, but I think there is still possibilities to make a change, and we can make the world better. And we need to stick to this. We need to remember that there's always possibility to do something, and we also have our belief, and we need to rely on the God we are believing in, and we're not alone, and we need to use this to make it better. So I hope all ACT members will join us. There's a lot of space in the climate cooperation within ACT Alliance, and I hope we can increase our efforts to push for climate justice.
Romario, what would be your take? Romario? In a minute.
Sí. Wow. Bien. Continuar con la justicia social en donde estamos sufriendo cada vez más cambios, no solo ambientales, sino también cambios en la paz, en un mundo más desigual y con mayor violencia. Si no actuamos ahora, estamos sufriendo esa violencia. Como jóvenes, creo que estamos involucrados, nos estamos involucrando cada vez más en los frentes de exposición pública, liderando muchas de esas manifestaciones que exigen medidas urgentes a nivel global, pero también en las ciudades, con temas más locales, temas buscando soluciones a problemáticas ambientales en general, y en donde participamos a través de nuestras organizaciones de fe, como en mi caso, en donde agradezco profundamente esa esperanza puesta desde la Fundación Hora de Obrar y de mi iglesia para poder liderar, y también agradecer a las organizaciones cooperantes a nivel global y local.
I don't know if Dr. Cornelia wants to have something to say.
I do understand. I do understand the frustration very much. So it has real background. But imagine if there would not have been civil society pressure before. Imagine how little would have been achieved then. So I would say yes, it is. We are not yet there, but we moved forward. And I can say from our own country, once again, from my experience, we had the German Sherpa in COP26 was very much in favor of moving the loss and damage issue forward, and was one of the pushing forces to do that. And this only after, I would say, almost a decade of being lobbied, especially by Bread for the World. That's what he once confessed before Paris, the COP in Paris. He said he had never been thinking about loss and damage, and he was not convinced at all about it. And the continuous pressure helped him to get there, to understand the necessity and the urgency. And I would underline what Mattias has been said before. We need to do the most parts of our lobby work need to happen back home throughout the year. It is not enough to be at COP and do something at COP. It's too late. You have to convince your delegations, your governments, your parliaments beforehand during the whole year. And each of us, not individually, nationally and locally, not individually, but as part of a joint strategized agenda and way of working together as the ACT Alliance.
Thank you, Dr. Cornelia, for that response. I have a question as well from Bernard, and I'd like to pose it to you, Patricia. In the Middle East, the weather in November is like summer with no rain. How would you contribute to raising awareness among youth that this is part of climate change and that our consumption patterns do affect it? How do we come up with practical suggestions, not simply to sensitize, but also to change attitudes? I'll pose it to you, Patricia, since you mentioned something about sensitization, raising awareness, and some practical actions. How would you respond to that question? Sorry, I'll mute. I think the host, can you unmute? Yeah, yes, please.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think what I can tell you is what we are doing now here in the Philippines, how we are mobilizing our church people as as advocates for the environment, as advocates for climate justice, the priests, pastors, lay leaders in churches, they are very able to communicate these messages about the environment. They are very rooted, strategically placed inside the communities. The communities have trust in them, in what they are saying and what they are advocating for. So these are our local churches, are powerful starting points, but these are just starting points. So their voices will not be heard in a larger scale if we don't support them. So I think we could work on that. We could mobilize our church people, and then do it creatively through songs, through our Bible reflections. I think it is still powerful tool or medium until today. Yeah.
Thank you, Patricia, for that. I have one last question, and I have about 3 minutes left for question and answer. And this question goes: which countries will not act decisively to help developing countries in time? That really is a realistic conclusion following the last 3 COPs at the very least. How can young people, together with local communities, look at their own communities and local churches to use local solutions? I would pose this question to you, Romario, and Patricia as well, but Romario, you can go first. Romario? Yeah.
Sí, muchas de las organizaciones locales, las iglesias y las organizaciones locales son fundamentales para las cuestiones cotidianas del día a día. Y con respecto a los países, muchas contribuciones vimos y vemos que no son realistas, que no se van a cumplir. Y es ahí también donde exigimos controles, que los controles también sean realistas. Así como existen otros controles de seguridad y controles económicos a nivel global, también que sean no más acciones voluntarias de los países, sino que sean obligatorias, tanto para los desarrollados como los que están en vías de desarrollo. En mi caso, en la COP, cuando se tomó la declaración.
No problem. Thank you so much for that. I'll also give Patricia to respond. I'm sure we can join the dots with the youth conversation. Patricia, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. How can young people together with local communities look to their communities and local churches to use local solutions? I think it starts with education and raising awareness. And of course, like what I said earlier, like using our local churches to do that, to build the capacities, to build the knowledge and awareness on the climate crisis. But more than that, we should invite young people to go outside, to integrate with those marginalized communities, with those grassroots communities, most affected communities. We need, speaking as a young person, it's hard for me to just imagine those scenarios or those situations. I have to see it for myself, and I have to give my warm-bodied contribution to that solution. So I wish we could have more platforms for that, more integration, more from charity. We need to move forward to organizing in the communities, in humanitarian and development. We should involve more young people into those actions.
Thank you. What a strong call for young people to be involved. I think, ladies and gentlemen, everyone who's listening, our time is up for questions and answers. And I would like to thank you all for the interactive session that we've had. But before I let off the hook my panelists, I'm going to give each one of them at least 90 seconds to answer this question. So to all my panelists, and to you, I'll start with Dr. Cornelia. Dr. Cornelia, where do you see hope in all this discussion?
I need less than 90 seconds. The hope is that the young people took up the fight and will take it on, and with even much more courageousness and power than our generation does. So I'm extremely grateful for that, and I'm really, beside my faith, this really fills me with hope.
Thank you. Mattias, my brother, where do you see hope?
Well, I could echo Cornelia. I also see a hope among the youth and also within the faith movement. But I would also like to add, I also see more hope even when it comes to actors around us. If we look at, for example, the donors, where we as ACT members look for funds, more and more of the donors, they actually have requirements about climate considerations. That means that more and more organizations applying for funds, they must also ensure that their activities are contributing to climate action or environmental sustainability. So there's hope. More and more actors, both private and official, are taking action, and let's promote that and use the momentum and continue to push.
Thank you. I'll come to the young people. Romario, where do you see hope?
Ok, como mencioné hoy en el culto de ayer, hablamos sobre el apocalipsis y estas situaciones que estamos viviendo. Pero la visión del libro de Apocalipsis finaliza con esperanza. Con el cielo y la tierra son creados nuevamente. Y es aquí donde estamos una generación nueva, una generación de restauración, pero intergeneracional, y ahí es donde también veo con fe y esperanza de que estamos hablando de estos temas, ya lo dije, eso es importante, y también valorar los casos exitosos, por más que tengamos, como mencionó Mattias, necesitamos más proyectos de cambio climático, de justicia climática, pero ya valorar y destacar esos que fueron exitosos, y también aprender de los que no lo fueron, esos también nos sirven para el presente y para el futuro. Gracias.
Thank you, Romario, for that quick one. I'll come to lastly, my friend Patricia. Where do you see hope as you round up?
Yeah, personally, I've been working with grassroots communities for 5 years now, focusing on DRR and CC and climate change adaptation. So I see hope whenever farmers are coming together and coming up with solutions, community-based solutions to drought, or when they're utilizing climate resilient crops. I'm seeing hope when there are fishers who are learning about the rising sea level, or receiving knowledge or scientific data regarding their experiences. I see hope in the eyes of our indigenous people whose beliefs are affirmed by scientific data on the climate. I see hope in my fellow youth here in ACT Alliance who are working together to they might not be on the field, but they are very eager to learn about climate crisis. They are very eager to dedicate their time and energy for climate change. I see hope as well as in my co-panelists here and everyone here in ACT Alliance, that for the fact that we are talking about the climate crisis, even amid our differences in our situations, in our countries, and in our communities, we are on the same page.
Thank you for Patricia. I'm very, very excited and very, very happy with this panel we have had. And I want to thank you all who are listening in, who are participating and sharing your comments. And thank you, Dr. Cornelia. Thank you, Mattias. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Romario, for sharing from your different contexts. And I wish this was a physical engagement rather than a virtual one. We could have been having more and more conversations and even more and more side conversations on very, very interesting issues. Some of them are being raised in the comment section of our chat box. And we really, really thank you for this. And I would like to now, ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our panel. And I wish you the best in further deliberations. And I hope we are going to have more and more deliberations and make sure we have our act together and be able to act now for climate justice. Thank you so much. And I hand over back to the moderator, Ms. Bigitten. I hand over back to you. Thank you so much.